The auctioneer's gavel cracked against the wooden podium like a gunshot. And with that single blow, everything Amelia Brennan had ever known disappeared into the hands of strangers. She stood in the dusty street of Empire City, Nevada, watching as men loaded her father's furniture onto wagons, each piece a memory being carted away. The ranch house where she had been born 22 years ago, the stables her father had built with his own hands, the copper bell that had called workers to supper for a decade, all of it, sold to satisfy debts she had not known existed until 3 months ago when pneumonia took her father in the spring of 1882. The banker, Mr. Caldwell, stood on the porch of what had been her home, looking satisfied as a cat with cream. He had come calling the day after the funeral, papers in hand, explaining with false sympathy that her father had taken loans against the property. Loans that were now due. Loans with interest that had compounded into an impossible sum. "You have 30 days, he had said, adjusting his spectacles. "Then we foreclose." Amelia had searched every drawer, every hiding place, hoping her father had left something behind. She found only more bills, more debts. The drought of the previous summer had killed half the cattle. Her father had borrowed to buy feed, to keep the ranch hands employed, to maintain hope that the next season would be better. It had not been better. And now he was gone, and she was alone, and the bank was taking everything. She clutched her carpet bag, which held all she had left in the world. 2 dresses, her mother's wedding ring, a degria type of her parents on their wedding day, and $47 she had earned selling her horse. The magnificent house her father had built, with its wraparound porch and glass windows shipped all the way from San Francisco, would belong to Caldwell's bank by sundown. They would sell it to some wealthy rancher from California, no doubt. Someone who had not poured their sweat and soul into the Nevada soil. Miss Brennan. She turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, hat in his hands. He was tall, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His clothes were worn but clean, and his eyes were a striking gray that seemed to hold more kindness than she had seen in weeks. "I am sorry to intrude at such a time," he said, his voice carrying a gentle drawl that marked him as a Texan. "My name is Harrison Boyd. I worked for your father 2 summers back, during the drive to Sacramento." Amelia searched her memory and found a vague recollection of a young ranch hand, perhaps 20 then, who had been good with the horses. "I remember. You left before the fall roundup." "Yes, madam. My own father had taken ill. I needed to return to Texas." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I heard in town what happened. About the foreclosure, I wanted to pay my respects. Your father was a good man, fair, honest. That is rare. Thank you." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "That is kind of you to say." Harrison Boyd looked at the house, then back at her. "Forgive me for being forward, but what will you do now?" It was the question she had been avoiding. Empire City had no positions for unmarried women beyond the saloon, and she would sooner starve than work there. She had no family left, no relatives who might take her in. Her mother had died when she was 10, and her father had been an only child like herself. "I will find something," she said, lifting her chin. "I am capable. I can keep books, manage a household. Perhaps someone needs a housekeeper." He nodded slowly, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. They both knew that positions like that were scarce and usually filled by older women with references. "I have a proposal," Harrison said carefully. "Not a proposal," he added quickly, color rising in his cheeks. "A business arrangement. I have been working as a ranch hand for the past 2 years, saving every penny. I have almost enough to buy a small spread, but not quite enough for anything substantial. If you were willing to work alongside me, we could pool our resources." In time, we might earn enough to buy back your father's land. Amelia stared at him. Buy it back, Mr. Boyd. The bank is asking $4,000. That is an impossible sum. Not impossible, difficult certainly, but not impossible. He met her gaze directly. I have $800 saved. You have, what, 50? 47. So we start with $847. I can get work at any of the big ranches. The Diamond T is hiring for the fall drive. The pay is good and they feed the hands. If you could find work as well, perhaps cooking for one of the bigger outfits, we could save aggressively. Live carefully. In a year, maybe two, we could have enough for a down payment. Convince the bank to sell it back. Why would you do this? The question burst from her before she could stop it. You do not know me. You barely knew my father. Why would you bind yourself to such a scheme? Harrison was quiet for a long moment, looking down at the hat he turned in his hands. When I worked for your father, I had just lost my own pa. I was angry, hurting. I picked a fight with another hand over something stupid. Your father broke it up. He could have fired me. Should have, probably. Instead, he sat me down and talked to me. Really talked about loss and grief and how anger only hurts ourselves. He told me about losing your mother, about how he had nearly drunk himself to death before he realized he had a daughter who needed him. Harrison looked up, his gray eyes serious. He saved me, Miss Brennan. Not just my job, but something in me that was breaking. I owe him a debt I can never repay. But I can help his daughter, if you will let me. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes for the first time since the auction began. She had held herself together through the funeral, through the banker's visit, through watching her home be stripped bare. But this simple act of kindness from a near stranger broke something loose in her chest. I cannot ask you to sacrifice years of your life for me, she whispered. You are not asking. I am offering. He stepped closer, his voice earnest. Miss Brennan, I know this is not a romantic notion. I know you do not know me well, but I give you my word as a man of honor that I will work as hard as it takes. I will respect you, and I will not rest until you have your father's land back in your name. She looked at the house one more time. The sun was setting behind it, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Her father had stood on that porch every evening, watching the sunset, his hand resting on the rail he had sanded smooth himself. She could almost see him there now, could almost hear his voice telling her to be strong, to be smart, to never give up on what mattered. All right, she said, turning back to Harrison. I accept your proposal. Your business proposal, she clarified, though something in her chest fluttered strangely at the look of relief and determination that crossed his face. You will not regret this, he said firmly. I promise you that. They shook hands there in the dusty street, as the last of her possessions were hauled away and the life she had known ended. But perhaps, she thought, holding Harrison Boyd's calloused hand in her own, perhaps this was not an ending after all. Perhaps it was something else entirely. Harrison had a small room at the boarding house run by Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had come to Nevada during the silver boom and stayed after her miner husband died. She agreed to let Amelia take the room adjacent to Harrison's, though her sharp eyes had moved between them with clear speculation. Just business, Harrison had explained firmly. The lady needs a respectable place to stay while she looks for work. Mrs. Chen had said, unconvinced but willing to take their money. That first night, Amelia lay in the narrow bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the boarding house. Footsteps in the hall, voices murmuring through thin walls, the distant sound of piano music from the saloon down the street. Everything felt wrong. This room was not hers. This bed was not hers. Even her future was no longer entirely hers, now tied to a man she barely knew. But when morning came and she heard a gentle knock on her door, She found Harrison waiting with a cup of coffee and a determined expression. "I talked to the foreman at the Diamond Tea last night," he said. "They will hire me for the drive to Sacramento. Leaves in 2 weeks. The pay is $150 for the full drive, plus food. I also heard that the Hargrove Ranch is looking for a cook. Their regular woman broke her leg and will be laid up for months. If you are willing, I will take you out there this morning to meet Mrs. Hargrove." Amelia took the coffee gratefully, feeling her spirits lift slightly. "You have been busy. No time to waste. Every day we delay is another day of interest adding to what we need to save." He smiled then, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer. "Besides, I am an early riser, always have been. Might as well put the time to use." The Hargrove Ranch was a 45-minute ride from Empire City, and Harrison had borrowed horses from the livery with a promise to have them back by noon. As they rode through the Nevada landscape, all sage and scrub and distant mountains, Harrison talked about his plan. "The drive will take 6 weeks, maybe 7 if we hit bad weather. That gives you time to establish yourself at the Hargrove place, prove your worth. When I get back, I will find work at one of the ranches near town, something steady through the winter." He adjusted his hat against the climbing sun. "We should set a goal. How much do you think we can save in the first 6 months? Amelia did the arithmetic in her head. "If you make $150 on the drive and can earn, say, $30 a month after that, and I can make $20 a month cooking, that would be $330 in 6 months. Plus what we already have, that is just over $1,000. "Not enough for a down payment on a property like your father's," Harrison said. "But it is a start. And if we can maintain that pace in 2 years we would have close to 2,000, maybe enough to negotiate with the bank." "Mr. Caldwell is not the negotiating type," Amelia said bitterly. "Then we will go over his head. Banks are businesses. They want their money. If we come with cash and a solid plan, they will listen." He glanced at her. "You have to believe that, Miss Brennan. If we do not believe it is possible, we will never make it happen." She wanted to believe him. The hope in his voice was so genuine, so unshakable that it was almost contagious. But the wound of loss was still too fresh, the humiliation of the foreclosure too raw. "Call me Amelia," she said instead. "If we are to be business partners, formality seems excessive." His smile widened. "Then you must call me Harrison, or just Har if you prefer. Most folks do." "Harrison suits you," she said, surprising herself. But it was true. He seemed like someone who carried his full name with dignity, Mrs. Hargrove turned out to be a brisk, efficient woman in her 50s, who looked Amelia up and down with the practiced eye of someone who had hired and fired dozens of workers over the years. "Can you cook for 20 men 3 times a day?" she asked without preamble. "Yes, madam. I cooked for my father's ranch hands for years. Usually 8 to 10 men, but I can scale up." "Can you make biscuits that do not double as doorstops?" "My biscuits are light as air," Amelia said with more confidence than she felt. Her biscuits were good, but she had a sudden vision of 20 hungry ranch hands complaining about her cooking. "Can you manage a budget? We give you a food allowance each week. You order from town. Keep track of every penny, make sure nothing goes to waste." "I kept the household accounts for my father. I am good with numbers." Mrs. Hargrove nodded slowly. "I will give you a 2-week trial, $20 a month plus room and board. You eat what the men eat. You work dawn to full dark, 1 day off a month. If you prove yourself, we will make it permanent." "Deal." Amelia felt Harrison tense beside her, and she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. $20 was not generous, but it was work, and it was immediate. "Deal," Amelia said, extending her hand. Mrs. Hargrove shook it with a grip like iron. "Good. You start tomorrow. Harrison Boyd, you make sure she gets back to town and settled. I expect her here by dawn." The ride back to Empire City was quieter. Amelia felt the weight of what she had agreed to settling on her shoulders. 20 men, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. It would be exhausting, but it was necessary. "You will do fine," Harrison said, as if reading her thoughts. "Your father used to brag about your cooking, said you made the best apple pie in Nevada." "He was biased," Amelia said, but she smiled. "Though my pie is quite good. Then you will have those ranch hands eating out of your hand within a week." He was quiet for a moment. "I will be leaving on the drive soon after you start at the Hargrove place. We will not see each other for close to 2 months. Something in his tone made her look at him. There was a crease between his eyebrows, a tension in the way he held the reins. "Will you be all right?" he asked. "Out there on your own?" "I am not afraid of hard work," she said, "and Mrs. Hargrove seems fair." "I do not doubt your capability," Harrison said quickly. I suppose I feel responsible. This was my idea, after all. If it goes badly, if you are unhappy, then I will leave and find something else," Amelia interrupted. "Harrison, I appreciate what you are doing, truly. But I am not some delicate flower that will wilt without supervision. I have been taking care of myself and my father's ranch for years. I can manage 2 months cooking for Cowboys." He looked chagrined. "Of course, I apologize. I did not mean to suggest. I know what you meant." Her voice softened. "And I appreciate the concern, but we are partners in this venture. Equal partners. That means I need to pull my own weight, make my own decisions, trust that I can handle what comes." "I do trust you," Harrison said. "More than I probably should, given that we have known each other all of 2 days. He shook his head wonderingly. "My mother would say I have lost my mind, offering to help a woman I barely know buy back a $4,000 ranch." "Your mother is probably right," Amelia said. "Though I would argue we are both slightly mad. I am the one who agreed to this scheme." They both laughed then, and it felt good. Natural. Like perhaps they could actually be friends, these 2 near strangers bound together by ambition and debt, and the memory of a good man who had helped them both. The 2 weeks before Harrison left passed in a blur of activity. Amelia threw herself into work at the Hargrove Ranch, waking before dawn to start breakfast, spending her days cooking, cleaning, planning meals, managing inventory. The work was even harder than she had anticipated. The kitchen was hot, even as September cooled the desert air outside. The men were hungry, demanding, and sometimes crude, though Mrs. Hargrove tolerated no disrespect toward Amelia, but she was good at it. Her biscuits were, indeed, light as air. Her beef stew was hearty and satisfying. Her pies drew actual compliments from men who barely looked up from their plates most days. By the end of the first week, Mrs. Hargrove's mouth curved into something approaching approval. "You will do," she said, which was apparently high praise. Harrison came to visit on her first day off, riding out with a borrowed horse for her so they could talk away from the ranch. They rode to a spot overlooking a valley where cattle grazed, the mountains rising purple in the distance. "I leave tomorrow," he said. "The drive to Sacramento." "I know." Amelia felt an unexpected pang at the thought. In 2 weeks she had grown accustomed to Harrison Boyd's steady presence, his unflappable optimism, his quiet determination. "I will send letters when I can, let you know where we are." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This is for you. Do not open it unless you need it." She took the envelope, feeling the thickness of bills inside. "Harrison, I cannot. It is only $100. Emergency money. If something happens, if you need to leave the Hargrove place, if there is some crisis, I want to know you have resources." He held up a hand as she tried to protest. "Consider it a loan. You can pay me back when we buy your ranch, when not if." His certainty still amazed her. "Thank you," she said quietly, tucking the envelope into her pocket. "For everything. For believing this is possible when I cannot quite believe it myself." "You will believe it eventually," Harrison said. "Give it time." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the cattle move slowly across the valley. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. The air smelled of sage and dust and possibility. "I will miss this," Harrison said. "These talks, having someone who understands what we are working toward." "I will miss it too," Amelia admitted. "More than I expected to, truth be told. You have been a good friend, Harrison Boyd." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I hope I can be more than a friend, Amelia, someday. When this is done, when we have accomplished what we set out to do, I hope. That is, I would like—" He stopped, color rising in his cheeks. "Never mind. That is getting ahead of things. First we focus on the goal." But Amelia's heart was suddenly beating faster, and she found herself studying Harrison's face as if seeing it for the first time. The strong jaw, the honest gray eyes, the way he held himself with quiet confidence. He was handsome, she realized. Not in the flashy way of gamblers or the rugged way of aging ranchers, but in a solid, dependable way that made her feel safe. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "when you return from Sacramento, we can discuss what happens after the goal. I find that I am not entirely opposed to the idea of more than friendship." Harrison's face lit up like sunrise. "Really? Really?" She smiled, feeling suddenly shy. "But let us take this one step at a time. First you go to Sacramento and return safely. Then we can talk about the future." "I will return," Harrison promised. "You have my word on that." He kept his word. 7 weeks later, in the middle of November, Amelia looked up from kneading bread dough to see a rider approaching the ranch house. Her heart leaped before her mind fully registered who it was. Harrison, thinner than when he had left, his face weathered from weeks on the trail, but smiling as he dismounted. She wiped her hands on her apron and ran out to meet him. Propriety be damned. He caught her in a hug that lifted her off her feet, and she laughed, giddy with relief and joy. "You are back," she said unnecessarily. "I am back." He set her down but did not let go entirely, his hands resting lightly on her arms. "And I have $150 to add to our fund. How did you fare?" "I saved $80, Amelia said proudly. Mrs. Hargrove had made her position permanent after the trial period and had even given her a small raise. "Mrs. Hargrove increased my pay to $22 a month. I have been spending almost nothing." "That is amazing." Harrison's smile was so warm, so genuinely delighted, that Amelia felt her own smile widen in response. "We are well ahead of schedule, if we can maintain this pace, Harrison." She put a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the worn fabric of his shirt. "Before we discuss finances and schedules, welcome home. I am glad you are safe. I worried." His expression softened. "I worried too. About you, I mean, out here on your own." He covered her hand with his. "I thought about you every day, Amelia. Wondered how you were doing, whether you were happy, whether you ever thought of me." "Every day," she admitted. "I thought of you every day." They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped, eyes locked, something unspoken building between them. Then one of the ranch hands yelled something about hungry men waiting for lunch, and the spell broke. Amelia stepped back, laughing self-consciously. "I have to finish the meal, but come back tonight, after supper. We can talk properly then." "I will be here," Harrison promised. He came back as the sun was setting, freshly washed and shaved, his hair still damp. They walked away from the ranch house to the same overlook where they had talked before he left. And this time, when Harrison took her hand, Amelia laced her fingers through his without hesitation. "I got a job at the Diamond T," Harrison said. Permanent position, $40 a month plus room and board. The foreman remembered me from the drive, said I was the hardest worker he had seen in years. That is wonderful, Amelia said. At this rate, we will have enough for a substantial down payment within a year. About that. Harrison turned to face her fully. I have been thinking. We have been calling this a business arrangement, but Amelia, it has not felt like business to me for some time now. I realize we have not known each other long, but these past 2 months on the trail, all I could think about was getting back to you, seeing your face, hearing your voice. He took a breath. I am falling in love with you. Have been falling, probably since that first day in Empire City when you stood there so brave and lost and let me help you. And if there is any chance you might feel the same way, I want to make this real. Not a business arrangement, a partnership, a marriage. Amelia's heart hammered in her chest. It was too fast. The logical part of her mind insisted. They barely knew each other. They had spent perhaps 3 weeks together in total. How could she possibly know if she loved him? But the rest of her, the part that was not logical at all, knew the answer already. She had fallen for Harrison Boyd's kindness, his determination, his unwavering belief that impossible things could become possible with enough work and faith. She had fallen for the way he listened when she talked, the way he never made her feel weak for grieving, the way he treated their goal not as a favor to her but as a shared dream. I am falling in love with you too, she said, and watched his face transform with joy. I did not want to admit it, even to myself. It seemed too complicated, too risky to add feelings to an already uncertain situation. But Harrison, when I saw you ride up today, I was happier than I have been since before my father died. You make me believe things can be good again. That I can be happy again. You can, he said fiercely. You will be. I will spend every day making sure of it. He kissed her then, gentle and careful as if she were something precious. Amelia kissed him back, feeling something tight in her chest finally release. This was right. This was what she wanted. Not just the ranch, not just justice for her father's memory, but this man and this future they were building together. They were married in December, a small ceremony at the church in Empire City with Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Hargrove as witnesses. Amelia wore her mother's wedding ring and a new dress she had sewn herself from fabric Harrison bought her as a gift. They spent their wedding night at the boarding house, in Harrison's room that now belonged to both of them, and Amelia felt happy for the first time since she had watched her father's coffin lowered into the Nevada ground. Mrs. Boyd, Harrison murmured against her hair as they lay together afterward, the lamp turned low. I like the sound of that. I do too, Amelia said, and she did. She had not expected to marry, had thought perhaps she would end up a spinster housekeeper or paid companion. Instead she had this, a husband who loved her, a purpose that drove them both, and the slow-building hope that they might actually achieve the impossible. The first year of their marriage passed in hard work and small joys. Amelia continued at the Hargrove Ranch during the week, returning to Empire City on her days off to be with Harrison. It was not ideal, but they both agreed that her salary was too good to give up. Harrison worked dawn to dark at the Diamond T, breaking horses and mending fences and doing whatever needed doing. They saved every penny they could spare, watching their fund grow with satisfaction. By their first anniversary, they had $1,800. Not enough yet, but getting closer. They celebrated by buying a bottle of good whiskey and toasting their progress in their boarding house room. Another year, Harrison said, and we will be ready to approach the bank. But fate, as Amelia had learned, did not always follow the plan. In February of 1884, Mrs. Hargrove called Amelia into her office with an expression Amelia could not read. I am selling the ranch, she said without preamble. My son in San Francisco wants me to come live with him, meet my grandchildren before I am too old to enjoy them. I have a buyer lined up and he has his own staff. Amelia felt the floor drop out from under her. When? End of March. I am sorry, Amelia. You have been the best cook I have ever employed, but I am 63 years old and I want to spend my remaining years with family. Mrs. Hargrove handed her an envelope. This is 2 months severance pay, plus a reference letter that will get you work anywhere in Nevada. Amelia took the envelope with numb fingers. $44. It was generous, but it also meant she had lost her position. Lost the steady income they had been counting on. Harrison took the news calmly when she told him that evening. We will figure it out, he said. Maybe it is even a blessing. You have been working yourself to the bone, Amelia. Barely see you as it is. But we need my income, Amelia said. Without it, we will never save enough. Then I will work more, or we will find you something in town. Maybe the hotel needs help or one of the town families needs a housekeeper. He pulled her close. We have come this far, we will find a way. They did find a way, though it was harder than either expected. The hotel was not hiring, and the few families in Empire City, wealthy enough to employ a housekeeper, already had one. Amelia eventually found work doing laundry for several households, which paid far less than cooking, but at least allowed her to stay in town near Harrison. Their savings slowed to a trickle. Then, in May, the Diamond Tea foreman pulled Harrison aside after a long day of branding. There is a land parcel opening up, he said. Small spread, only about 400 acres, but good grazing land and water rights. Owner died and his widow is selling. Price is reasonable, $1,500. Harrison felt his heart jump. $1,500. They had just over $2,000 in savings. If they bought this land, they would have a stake, a place to build from. But it would also mean giving up on Amelia's father's ranch, at least for now. The Brennan property was worth at least $4,000. There was no way they could afford both. He discussed it with Amelia that night, laying out the options. We could buy this smaller property, build it up, prove ourselves as ranchers. In a few years, when it is profitable, we could sell it and use the proceeds toward buying your father's place. Amelia was quiet for a long time. Harrison watched emotions flicker across her face. Temptation, doubt, longing, resignation. Finally, she shook her head. No, we set out to buy back my father's ranch. That is still the goal. This other property, it might be a good investment, but it is not what we are working toward. I do not want to get distracted. She took his hand. I know it seems foolish to turn down a certain thing for an uncertain dream, but Harrison, my father, built that ranch from nothing. He survived droughts and harsh winters and market crashes. That land is in my blood. I cannot give up on it. Then we will not give up, Harrison said firmly. We stay the course. But staying the course became harder as months turned into more than a year. By the fall of 1884, they had saved $2,200, still far short of what they needed. The bank had sold the Brennan property to a wealthy rancher from Sacramento for $3,500, and rumor was he was planning to sell it again for a profit once he had made improvements. We should approach him, Harrison suggested. Explain the situation. Maybe he would be willing to sell it to you for what he paid. They rode out to the ranch on a cool October morning, Amelia's heart in her throat as she saw her childhood home for the first time since the foreclosure. The new owner had made changes already. A fresh coat of paint on the house, new fencing, and expanded stable. It looked prosperous and well-maintained, which somehow made it worse. The rancher, a man named Frederick Walsh, listened to their pitch with a face like granite. When Harrison finished explaining, Walsh shook his head. I paid $3,500 for this property, and I have put at least another $1,000 into improvements. Even if I wanted to sell, which I do not, I would not take less than $5,000. This is prime grazing land with excellent water rights. It will only appreciate in value. But it was her father's ranch, Harrison said, anger creeping into his voice. It was stolen from her by unfair loan terms, and that is not my concern, Walsh interrupted. I bought the property legally. What happened before is unfortunate, but it is not my problem. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do. They rode back to town in silence, Amelia's eyes dry but her heart breaking. $5,000. They might as well aim for the moon. That night, lying in Harrison's arms, she finally let herself cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears she had shed at her father's funeral, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Harrison held her through it, murmuring comfort, his own voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry," he kept saying. "I am so sorry, Amelia. I thought we could do it. I really believed we could." "It is not your fault," she managed between sobs. "You have done more than anyone could ask, more than I had any right to expect. But Harrison, I think we need to accept reality. We will never save $5,000. Even if we work for 10 years, it is too much." "No." Harrison's voice was firm. "Do not give up, not yet. There has to be a way." But as winter arrived and 1884 turned into 1885, even Harrison's optimism began to fray. They were both exhausted from constant work and little to show for it. Amelia's laundry jobs barely covered her expenses, and Harrison's wages at the Diamond Tea had not increased. They were stuck, treading water, the dream slipping further away with each passing month. Then, in March of 1885, everything changed. Harrison came home with news that the Diamond Tea foreman was retiring and had recommended Harrison as his replacement. The job paid $70 a month, nearly double his current wages. "I told them I needed to discuss it with my wife first," Harrison said, his eyes bright with barely contained excitement. "But Amelia, with that salary, we could save real money. $1,000 a year, maybe more. In 4 years, we could have enough for the ranch." 4 years, Amelia repeated. It sounded like forever, but it also sounded possible, which was more than she had felt in months. "Will you take the job, if you think I should?" Harrison said. "It is more responsibility, longer hours, but the pay is too good to pass up." "Take it," Amelia said. "And I will find something better than laundry. There must be something." She found it 2 weeks later, when the schoolteacher in Empire City left to get married and the town council needed a replacement. Amelia had been educated by her mother, who had been a teacher before marriage, and had helped teach the ranch hands' children to read during quiet seasons. The council hired her at $35 a month, more than she had ever earned. With Harrison's new salary and her teaching position, they saved $700 in just 6 months. For the first time since they had begun their quest, the goal felt achievable. They might actually do this. 3 more years, Harrison said in September, as they reviewed their finances. They had moved into a small house now, renting from Mrs. Chen, a step up from the boarding house. "If nothing goes wrong, we will have $5,000 by the end of 1888. We can approach Walsh again, or wait for another property to become available." But Amelia shook her head slowly. "I have been thinking about something. What if we did not wait?" "What do you mean?" "What if we went to the bank now with the money we have? Not to buy the property outright, but to take out a loan. Show them we have steady income, savings, a solid plan. Banks lend money to ranchers all the time." "Why not to us?" Harrison considered it. "It is risky. We would be taking on debt, just like your father did. But we would be taking it on with full knowledge and preparation. My father borrowed out of desperation during a drought. We would be borrowing from a position of strength, with steady incomes and savings to fall back on. Amelia leaned forward. Harrison, I am tired of waiting. I am tired of watching my father's ranch be owned by someone else. If there is a chance we can do this now, I want to try. They went to the bank the next week, dressed in their best clothes with a ledger showing their savings and income. Mr. Caldwell, the same banker who had foreclosed on the Brennan property, looked them over with barely concealed skepticism. You want to borrow how much? He asked. $2,500, Harrison said steadily. We have $2,700 in savings. We want to make an offer on the Walsh property for $5,000. Walsh is asking $5,000. Caldwell looked surprised. Last I heard, he was not interested in selling. We believe we can persuade him, Amelia said, if we have cash in hand and can make a compelling offer. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, studying them. You realize I foreclosed on that very property 3 years ago. The previous owner could not make his payments. I know, Amelia said evenly. I was the previous owner's daughter. This is my father's ranch we are trying to buy back. Something shifted in Caldwell's expression. Not quite shame, but perhaps discomfort. Miss Brennan, I apologize. I did not recognize you. Mrs. Boyd now, Amelia corrected. And I am not asking for charity or sympathy, Mr. Caldwell. I am asking for a loan based on merit. My husband is the foreman at the Diamond T. I am the school teacher in Empire City. We have steady income, no debts, and substantial savings. We are good risks. Caldwell reviewed their paperwork silently. When he looked up, his expression was thoughtful. I will grant you the loan on 2 conditions. First, the interest rate will be 6%. Second, you must make monthly payments of at least $30. Miss a payment and we foreclose. No exceptions. 6% was high but not unreasonable, and $30 a month was manageable with their combined income. We agree, Harrison said, extending his hand. They shook on it, and 3 days later walked out of the bank with a letter of credit for $2,500. Combined with their savings, they had $5,000 in hand. Now they just had to convince Frederick Walsh to sell. Walsh, when they approached him, was as stubborn as before. I told you, I am not interested in selling. This property is an investment. An investment that is not generating returns yet, Harrison pointed out. You have put money into improvements, but you are not running cattle on it. You are letting it sit while you focus on your California holdings. How do you know about my California holdings? Walsh demanded. Small town, Amelia said simply. People talk. Mr. Walsh, I will be direct with you. That ranch was my father's. It was stolen from us by circumstances beyond our control. I want it back. Not because of sentiment alone, though there is that, but because I know how to run it. I grew up there. I know which pastures flood in spring, which water sources dry up in summer, where the best shelter is during winter storms. That knowledge is worth something. Walsh crossed his arms. Even if I was inclined to sell, which I am not, $5,000 is too low. I have put $6,000 into this property at least. Then you would be losing $1,000, Harrison said. Unless you plan to spend the next several years developing it into a profitable operation. Do you have that time, Mr. Walsh? Because we do. We are willing to put in the work, live on the property, make it productive. You would walk away with your initial investment returned and could focus on your California properties without distraction. It was the right argument. Walsh clearly did not want to spend years in Nevada when his real interests lay elsewhere. After a long silence, he said, $5,200. That is my final offer. Take it or leave it. Amelia and Harrison exchanged glances. They did not have $5,200, but they were so close. Give us 24 hours, Amelia said. We need to review our finances." They walked away from the meeting both elated and frustrated. So close, just $200 short. "We could ask for a higher loan amount," Harrison suggested. "We would lose the favorable terms. Caldwell would see us as desperate." Amelia thought hard. "What about your saddle? That silver-trimmed saddle you inherited from your father. It must be worth at least $100. "And your mother's jewelry," Harrison added slowly. "The bracelet and necklace you never wear. Those could be worth another 100. They looked at each other, the weight of what they were considering settling between them. These were the last links to their parents, the final mementos of lives lost. But they were also just things. What they were buying was more important. "Let us do it," Amelia said. "My mother would understand. She always said family was about love and legacy, not objects." They sold the saddle and jewelry the next day, getting $180 combined. It was not quite 200, but it was close enough. They went back to Walsh and made their offer. $5,180, everything they had in the world. Walsh looked at them for a long moment. Then, to their surprise, he smiled. "You two have more determination than anyone I have ever met. $5,180 is fine. We have a deal." They signed the papers in April of 1885, 3 years after Amelia had watched her father's ranch be auctioned away. When the deed was transferred and the keys placed in her hand, Amelia thought she might faint from the overwhelming rush of emotion. They had done it. Against all odds, against every rational expectation, they had actually done it. Harrison swept her into his arms right there in the lawyer's office, spinning her around while she laughed and cried simultaneously. "We did it," he kept saying. "Amelia, we actually did it." They moved to the ranch the following week, carrying their few possessions in a borrowed wagon. The house looked different than Amelia remembered, cleaner and brighter with Walsh's improvements, but still fundamentally the same. She walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the mantel, the door frames, remembering her father's hands building these spaces. "He would be proud of you," Harrison said, watching her from the doorway. "Your father, he would be so proud." "Of us," Amelia corrected. "This was not just me, Harrison. I could never have done this alone." "Then it is a good thing you did not have to." He crossed the room and pulled her close. "We are home, Amelia, finally home." They spent the next months making the ranch their own. Harrison hired 2 ranch hands and bought a small herd of cattle with a loan from the Diamond T to be paid back when they sold the steers. Amelia tended a large garden and continued teaching, riding into town twice a week for classes. It was hard work, constant work, but it was theirs. By the end of 1885, they were not yet profitable, but they were stable. The cattle were thriving, the land was productive, and they were making their loan payments with money left over. They celebrated Christmas in the ranch house, decorating a pine tree Harrison cut from the mountains and roasting a goose Amelia had raised herself. "This is the best Christmas I have had in years," Amelia said, leaning against Harrison's shoulder as they sat by the fire. "Perhaps ever." "Just the first of many," Harrison promised. "We are going to build something amazing here, Amelia. I can feel it." In February of 1886, Amelia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not wanted to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Harrison, he picked her up and spun her around just as he had in the lawyer's office, his face glowing with joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, though the answer was obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "This is everything, Amelia. You, this ranch, our child. This is the life I dreamed of but never thought I would have." Their son was born in October, a squalling, red-faced miracle they named Henry Boyd after Harrison's father. Amelia had never known love could be so overwhelming, so all-encompassing. She would look at this tiny person they had created and feel her heart might burst from the fullness of it. Harrison was a devoted father, walking the floor with Henry when he cried at night, singing to him in a soft, off-key voice that never failed to make Amelia smile. They were a family now, complete in a way Amelia had not fully understood before. The ranch continued to grow. They expanded the herd, improved the pastures, built a new barn. By 1888, they were profitable enough to pay off the bank loan entirely. The day Harrison made the final payment, he came home with a bottle of champagne and a wild look in his eyes. "We own it," he said, catching Amelia up in a fierce embrace. "No bank, no loans, no debt. This ranch is ours, free and clear." They drank the champagne sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in shades of orange and gold, just as Amelia's father had done. Henry, now nearly 2, played at their feet with wooden horses Harrison had carved. "I wish my father could see this," Amelia said softly. "See what we built, see his grandson." "I think he does see it," Harrison said. "And I think he knows you kept your promise. You saved his legacy, Amelia. You brought it back to life." "We brought it back," she corrected. "I could not have done this without you, Harrison Boyd. You took a chance on a grieving woman with an impossible dream. You worked yourself to the bone for years to make it happen. This ranch belongs to both of us." "Then let us make a promise," Harrison said, "to keep building this together, to make it so successful and stable that our son, and whatever other children we might have, never have to worry about losing it, to create something that will last generations." "I promise," Amelia said, sealing it with a kiss. They kept that promise. Over the next decade, the ranch expanded to over 1,000 acres. They had 2 more children, daughters named Emma and Catherine, born in 1889 and 1892. Harrison became known as one of the most successful ranchers in Nevada, respected for his fairness and business acumen. Amelia continued teaching when she could, and eventually helped establish a proper schoolhouse in Empire City, funded partly by their donations. In 1895, on a warm spring evening, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. Mrs. Chen, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, made the trip from town. Even Mrs. Hargrove sent a letter from San Francisco with her congratulations. As the party wound down and guests departed, Harrison and Amelia found themselves alone on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Their children were asleep inside, exhausted from the excitement. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful and prosperous. "You ever think about that first day?" Harrison asked. "When I approached you after the auction?" "All the time," Amelia admitted. "I was so lost then, so convinced my life was over. And then you appeared with your impossible optimism and your crazy plan to save $5,000. "It was a crazy plan," Harrison agreed, laughing. "I cannot believe we actually pulled it off." "I can," Amelia said, "because I know you, Harrison Boyd. When you set your mind to something, you do not give up. You work and hope and believe until it happens." "We work and hope and believe," he corrected. "This was never just me, Amelia. We did this together." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his just as she had that first night they had admitted their feelings. "Together," she agreed. "Always together." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the Nevada night settle over the land they had fought so hard to reclaim. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. In the barn, the horses settled for the night. And in the house behind them, their children slept peacefully, unaware of the sacrifices and determination that had built the life they enjoyed. Amelia thought about her father, gone now for 13 years. She thought about his hands building this house, his voice calling workers to supper, his dreams for the future. She had kept those dreams alive. She had taken what was lost and made it whole again. Not alone, never alone, but with a partner who had believed in her when she could not believe in herself. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For that day. For approaching me when you did not have to. For offering to help when any sensible person would have walked away. For loving me before I knew I needed to be loved." Harrison lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Thank you for letting me. For taking a chance on a near stranger with a crazy plan. For working as hard as you did. For building this life with me." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "You made me a better man, Amelia Boyd. A happier man. I cannot imagine my life without you." "Then it is good you do not have to," she said, leaning into him, "because I plan on keeping you around for a very long time." They stayed on the porch long after the stars had fully emerged, talking about their children, their plans for expanding the herd next year, the new irrigation system Harrison wanted to install. They talked about the past and the future, about dreams realized and new dreams being born. And through it all, they held hands, two people who had found each other at the worst moment of one person's life and had built something beautiful from the ashes of loss. The ranch would continue to thrive. Their children would grow up strong and capable, eventually taking over operations themselves. Henry would become a successful rancher in his own right, expanding the operation even further. Emma would marry a rancher from a neighboring county, joining two successful properties. Catherine would become a teacher like her mother, founding a school that would educate Nevada children for generations. But all of that was still to come. For now, on this warm spring night in 1895, Harrison and Amelia Boyd sat on their porch, watching over the land they had saved together, content in the knowledge that they had achieved the impossible. They had taken grief and debt and turned it into prosperity and joy. They had honored the past while building the future. And most importantly, they had found in each other a love strong enough to make dreams come true. The bank had taken everything her father built. But with time, hard work, and a love neither of them had expected, they had bought it all back and made it even better. They had won, not just the land but the life they had always deserved. And as they finally rose to go inside, to check on their sleeping children and retire for the night, Amelia felt a peace she had not known since her father's death. She was home, truly, completely, wonderfully home, and she would never lose it again.